Welcome to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. I hope you guys are doing all right. My name is Jamal Thomas. Let me make sure the vibe. Oh, that's way too high. That's way too high. Let's take it there. I'm glad you guys enjoy me today. This is a fantastic morning, or at the very least on the East Coast. It's a nice, warm evening here. Of course, a war is still taking place that the United States is directly entered into. Do not believe those people who try to make you think Israel is a rogue actor, they're fighting a war of their own, all of this stuff. Nonsense. This is a combination of policy going back to the last 20, 25 years, with the sole purpose, the main objective being to take over the Middle East, using American might to reshape the Middle East in our image, using our colony with its lust to expand into greater Israel. That is what is taking place. Mainstream media is not reporting it that way. Mainstream media doesn't explain it that way. And in doing so, they make it look as if what is taking place in Russia and Ukraine is a disparate thing and something separate and distinct from what is taking place in Iran, or for this matter, this pivot to China that the United States wants to do. All of those things are directly related to maintaining and expanding an empire and strangling a baby in the bath crib, in a baby crib, this notion of multipolarity. They don't want it. And you can understand, anytime you bring up the notion of multipolarity, they take it as a hedge against hegemony. Now, I used to point out in my other videos how insane this sounds when you say it aloud. Like, it's one thing when the United States was making this argument, the soft power argument of we're love and light, we believe in liberty. Look at Superman, he's holding an eagle. How can you not like it? You can get coffee and porn. This is great. And look at that dastardly Soviet Union that is imprisoning its people and preventing any notion of open freedom of liberties. Okay, that's not a bad argument. Make that argument. Stalin is terrifying. And if you're talking about, our big shiny grocery stores, Hollywood, all that stuff is pretty alluring if you think about it just as human beings. I could go to a grocery store and get whatever I want. I could go to a shopping mall and get whatever I want, et cetera, et cetera. That is a pretty decent argument. And I would even go so far as to say that argument on some level one. Problem. What about today? How do you make a similar argument today? Well, you can't really make that argument today. The argument that they make is we're a hegemon. We don't believe in multipolarity. We believe that we should be the one in charge, which is not a soothing argument to other countries that don't want a hegemon, don't believe you're a rational or even a good actor, don't believe you're a force for good in the world. They think you guys are sociopaths, don't want their own notion of sovereignty in the context of their own country. The argument becomes far more tortured. The mask comes off. And what you have now is countries around the world that are aggregating around this idea of we want a new world. We want something different. We want something fundamentally different. This white world order with Europe and America effectively trying to run roughshod is not something that they all that much want. So what do you get? You get countries in Africa that pull out. You get the Sahel states that effectively push back on France, and even countries that are not part of the Sahel states, even they push back on this kind of the yoke of France. You get countries joining BRICS, many of which, if not necessarily joining directly, being its associates of BRICS. You get countries trying to hedge their bets against, let's say, one side of the world versus the other. And you get wars. And you get wars for the very sole purpose of stopping that aggregation of countries that have decided that they want something different, which is effectively the entirety of the world, minus Europe and the US. I want to go into what has been taking place and show some shots as I drink my coffee. I want to do that. But before I get into the shots, I want to make just kind of I want to answer some questions that I asked in the last video over the weekend. YouTube bastard demonetized those videos. That's okay. That's okay. Yes, I'm salty about it. It was a damn good video. Those videos got over 20,000 views. But I asked various questions in those videos. Look, this is not the channel that would make grand proclamations of there's the 50% chance that there will be a nuclear strike on. I don't do that. If I don't know, I don't say. And if I don't know, I stay in my lane. And I may pose questions if I don't necessarily have answers and give you kind of a breakdown of where things may go if I'm not entirely certain. So I posed questions on what I thought were apt, considering that the United States has entered the war and attacked Iran. Those questions, there were several, but the main ones that I think are most interesting, especially after the conversation with Morandi over the weekend, check that out, it was a damn good conversation, was one, why the theatrics? Meaning, the Trump administration was putting out a tweet that they hit 3 nuclear facilities, and they acted as if we've completely destroyed the facilities. Aren't we fantastic? And when the data started coming in, A, the people had moved the materials and themselves out of those facilities. And B, it doesn't seem like the damage was all that extensive. I mean, even if you're looking at the satellite footage, it doesn't seem like it's all that extensive. So it's like, okay, so why the dramatics? Why acting as if this kind of theatrical performance of how great you did? Now, one partial reason to that is that Donald Trump has talked himself into a corner, that he effectively said, I'm going to bomb, I'm going to bomb, I'm going to bomb. But again, you must understand from my workable point of view, the entire point was always for the U.S. to get involved. The entire point was always for the U.S. to overthrow the Iranian government. And as I pointed out on the channel, the talks were nonsense. They were. And as I pointed out, Israel was getting rocked. They were. And part of the rationale for the United States to get in after Israel was begging the U.S., oh my God, help us, help us. It became very clear that Israel couldn't carry the burden, and they needed the U.S. to get directly involved into the conflict. And so my thing was, okay, well, you were always going to get in. You were always using this nuclear fig leaf as your rationale for doing this. Why not go all in? Why this tepid attack? First question. The second question boiled down to, what does Iran do? The United States has now involved itself directly into the attack. And whereas the Iranian strategy was effectively to decapitate the areas of state and in somewhat of an attrition war that would last week after week after week, something that Israel just couldn't do. If you've noticed, they tried to decapitate leadership because they can't go into a long-term war. It has to be sharp and quick, kind of like the German Nazis, right? The Nazis were very good at these sharp, quick wars. And so when they were taking over Europe, they were able to take over Europe pretty quickly. When they hit the Soviet Union, there's a reason why all of those deaths started to tick up to the tune where you got, 80% of the Nazis that died on the Eastern Front. They were not planning on a long-term war. In fact, when you go into the readings of it, the logistics were never built for this kind of long-term war, especially in regards to the level and the distance that they would have to go in the Soviet Union. They didn't care. Fuck it. We're still going to do it. They'll fall over. Triumph of the will. Okay. Fair enough. Well, the second group of Nazis, or the second iteration, called Zionists, also as a colony of squatters that only equal about 8 million people, much less now because many of them have taken the Samsonite option. Yes, I'm stealing that from Garland. That is a funny saying. And it's effectively gone back to their actual homes as opposed to squatting in somebody else's home. I hope they leave the keys when they leave. But a country that small, that barely functions as a power and only functions as a power because the United States gives it the ability to do so, cannot get into this long attrition war for week after week after week after week, where they're bombing your energy facilities, they're bombing your ministries of interior, they're bombing one city after the next in Jerusalem, or what were the ones they hit today? What is it? Sahel or something? I'm not going to get the names right. But basically, they're hitting Tel Aviv, they're hitting Haifa, they're hitting your main economic centers. And people who have passports, because let's be honest, they're stealing somebody else's territory, can leave. Iran has nowhere else to go. That's their home. That's their country. Whereas your people are committed to the Zionist cause of stealing land, starving people, killing people, as long as they themselves can drink their cappuccinos, as long as they themselves can sunbathe and hang out on the beaches. Meaning the moment that those people are under threat and under penalty of death, they leave. How do you maintain a conflict for potentially months under that model when your economy is going to trash, when people are effectively leaving or living in bomb shelters and sewers? How do you do that? And I guess I'm pointing out, you can't. You can't. So whereas Iran can have this attrition war, a country of like 90 million people, 3 times the size of Iraq, they can absorb what you give them. You cannot absorb what they give you. I've said this on more than one occasion. I'm saying it again because it needs to be said. If we are in a trade-off between each other, you're only 8 million people, bro. We're 90 million people. Even if we take twice as much damage as we give you, you will fall. You will fall. So it matters, right? I guess I'm saying the question becomes, what does Iran do now that the U.S. has entered into the conflict? And does that strategy change? All right, first question. Why the theatrics from the Trump side? I think, if I had to guess, it has to do with the narrative that Trump went with. Meaning they're throwing this fake narrative of Iran's trying to get a bomb, and they're using that as a soothing anesthetic to the American public. They may not know any better, may not be paying attention, and ultimately don't really much care because, again, just like the Nazis in Israel, as long as there's no cost to you, you don't really care about the fact that you're killing people abroad. So this is the narrative bubble that they've wrapped themselves in. So it's kind of hard, if that's your narrative, to immediately say, we're now trying to change the government of Iran. We're now going to go on bombing sprees in Iran. Okay, that's kind of hard to do when you've told the American public for years that your issue is we don't want them to have a bomb, right? You're stuck in your bubble on some level. And so in being stuck in your bubble, they need a reason and rationale to get further ensconced into the conflict. And so we know that it would take a hell of a lot more to destroy the nuclear program. We know that. So the issue is not the nuclear program. The issue was never the nuclear program. The issue was we want to change the government of Iran. We want to use our proxy to do it. Our proxy couldn't necessarily do it. So we need to get further ensconced. How do we get further ensconced? I know we invade their sovereign territory and we bomb Iran. Iran has said we will respond to the U.S. aggression. And so we can believe that any attack that we do, whether it accomplishes the objective of trying to destroy the nuclear facilities or not, will provoke a response by Iran. That response by Iran would allow us a more organic attack against Iran that we can continue to escalate, going up an escalatory ladder. Under that model, Iran is not just hitting Israel at this point. Iran has to diversify its attention to the U.S. and Israel, something that we would prefer because on some level it would take some of the heat off of Israel, and it would allow us to get further ensconced into bombings that go beyond just nuclear sites that we didn't really care about all that much in the first place. I think that's what it boils down to. Meaning the theatrics was purely to step on an escalatory ladder. I take one step. We invite you to take a step. When you take that step, we would take another step. We invite you to take another step. And up the ladder we go. So that goes to Iran, which is why I was very interested in what Burundi was going to say on this. And I think Burundi, on some level, let the cat out the bag. Rational is effectively what Russia is doing, even though it may be unsatisfying. Iran will pump its chest. It will beat its chest like Tarzan. It will say, oh, we're going to hit you. There's going to be consequences. We are going to, you bastards, we are going to go after you and everything else. But what they know is that the U.S. wants us to step on this escalatory ladder. We do not want to give them a justification to get further involved in the conflict. Meaning it's one thing if you do it, there will be, let's say, political consequences for you doing that. But we don't want to give you a reason. We know that you want to do that. We know you want to get involved, but we don't want to give you a reason. So you can attack us. You can hit us, in which case we may respond in that case, because at that point we need to push back. But that is an unprovoked attack against us. You've already said you've destroyed all of the nuclear facilities. So why are you hitting us again under that model, right? Despite the fact they didn't destroy those things. The point that I'm making is from Iran's point of view, just like the Russians dealing with NATO, we know that you have troops in the Ukraine. We know that you are giving them weapons and everything else. We know that you're giving them intelligence to hit Russia. but we are not going to expand the scope of this war to allow you in. We're going to decimate your client. We're going to beat the devil out of your client. And when your client falls, you have nothing else here. Your mission would have failed. Meaning our success is decimating and destroying your client, not getting involved in a larger, wider war. And I suspect Iran may be thinking of this in the same way. If you notice, Morandi in that interview says something to the effect of, well, if they hit us again, he's like, well, what do you mean if they hit you again? They've already hit you once. You're involved in a war. He says, yeah, but I think the cat's out the bag on that. It's not satisfying, but it's rational. It makes sense. It's clinical logic. We do not want to create a pretext for the U.S. to get further involved in a war in a way that they can justify getting further involved in a war. And yes, I know that sounds insane because anybody who's rational, who's honest, will say, well, the U.S. had an unprovoked attack on Iran. What do you mean getting further involved in a war? But keep in mind the argument that the Trump administration is making, they are literally making the argument, weirdly enough, and Americans would accept it. Attacking a nuclear facility, it's not really attacking the state. It's just attacking a facility. And so Iran shouldn't respond to this. Now they know that's nonsense. They believe people are meat with eyes. And in some cases, there are cultists and MAGA that are just meat with eyes. And they would say, hey, that makes sense. That makes sense. That makes total sense. It's like, so if Iran had a bombing sortie on American nuclear power facilities, that's not an attack on America. That's an attack on the nuclear facilities because those are somehow separate and distinct from the state apparatus. Well, no, not in that situation. Oh, right. Okay. Right. It's different when it's somebody else, right? They believe people are meat with eyes. Unfortunately, there's a good percentage of people that are, and will buy it. The point that I'm making, though, is from Iran's point of view, they want us to step on the escalatory ladder. We're not going to do it. We're going to focus on our objective of beating the devil out of this client state. We're going to destroy your proxy. Those people who are fleeing, like literally just running into going to other countries, effectively going back home. Those things are diminishments of the state. When they blow up a building, when they blow up a location, when they blow up an apartment, okay, those are people who are not going back to that apartment, right? They're going to take their passport and go home. So Iran is sticking with status quo. They know that America may attack, and they may respond if America gets further involved in it. But that's not really what they want, per se. What they want is specific focus, which is, I suspect, what they're going to do. Specific focus. We're going to decapitate your proxy. We're going to decapitate your colony. That's what we're going to do. Now, Morandi pointed it out, saying he wanted the Zionist state to fall where it's one man, one vote. Okay. Whatever you call that. Destroy your enemy. Destroy your enemy. From the U.S. standpoint and Israeli standpoint, they're looking for change of government. That's always been the plan. That's not shocking. Donald Trump bringing it up in a tweet isn't a shocking device. It's, of course, I've said as much. I've said as much for months. That is the objective. Wesley Clark said as much going back 20 years. That's the objective. The people who seem to be shocked by all this, I don't know what they were paying attention to. But this was always the objective. And the entire point was doing that. And you can even see in the strikes that Israel is making as opposed to what Iran is making. Iran is going after vestiges of state, power, production, your ability to maintain power in your cities, your ability to function as a government. Whereas Israel is hitting hospitals, hitting education centers, et cetera, meaning they're doing something very similar as that they were doing in Gaza. They hit a police station, or at the very least a prison that was holding terrorists, political prisoners. Again, all of these things are done in order to engineer a coup. We want to overthrow the government. We want to create a failed state. That is their objective. That is their intention. That is their point. And so what Iran has to know, what China and Russia also has to know, that is the objective. They also all need to know and realize that the United States will get further involved in the war. They will come up with some of the reason, some of the rationale, some of the justification to get further involved. Because if indeed this becomes drawn out. Their proxy can't keep this up. You already see the issue with Ukraine, right? Think of all the air defense that the United States wasted in Ukraine. Okay, well, you don't have the capability of funding both. This is kind of, your queen has too many responsibilities, sir. It is a powerful piece, but you can't do both simultaneously. If one is pinned, she can't deal with the other. Or if she's protecting one, she can't deal with the other. You got to let one of those things go. And in this case, the queen has let Ukraine go in order to focus on Israel. The problem is you spent the last 3 years dumping all sorts of military equipment, hardware, and everything else into Ukraine that is no longer available to give to Israel. So when Russia says we're fighting the same enemy, they're right. You're fighting the same enemy. That enemy is funding both. The enemy can't fund both. So one has to drop away. Tsar Zelensky. I think it was Mark Sloboda. Don't mistake the mistress for the bride. Israel is the bride. This has been the plan for 20 years. And they will maintain and proceed with this plan to try to overthrow the Iranian government. So there's that. What time is it? Do we have time for coffee? Yes, we have time for coffee. I'm trying to think, is there anything else? But they're not being Trump is trapped in his narrative. But that narrative will not keep him trapped, especially if it seems as if Israel and the hits that it's taking is getting worse and worse and worse. And more people decide to leave. They will get involved. They will come up with a reason to get involved. What I think is going on is that they know the American public is against this. Meaning you're coming up with a justification and rationale using nuclear weapons. Okay. Americans are dumb enough, unfortunately, to believe that they have a right to attack another country that's sovereign and doing what they want in regards to them being sovereign. For whatever reason, they don't make the argument that the U.S. should invade Israel and take their nukes. They make the argument that the U.S. should attack a country that doesn't have nukes. And that under IAEA, is an Israeli spook or spy, or the Burley's working with Israelis, or for that matter, even Tulsi Gabbard, before she got her mind right. All of these people have said they're not trying to get a nuke. So even the narrative of it was nonsense. But again, they framed it and structured it as if, well, if they are, then it's okay to do X. And I'm saying even the premise of it is nonsense. What I'm getting at, though, is when you make that argument, you're trapped in that argument, especially when you know that the American public is not for another war of aggression to overthrow a government, just like it was in Iraq. We played that script. The American public is against that script after it was run and after they say, hey, we spent $10 trillion for this nonsense and the Taliban have taken over Afghanistan. It's kind of hard to run that script again when the American public is seeing the outcome of it. And so you come up with another nonsense script that's very similar to it. The point that I'm making, though, is when you trap yourself into that narrative, you're stuck with it. They will come up with another, if I'm right. And that attrition warfare starts wearing on Israel that much more so. They will come up with another narrative. Now the catch becomes, are they able to potentially overthrow the Iranian government before the Israeli government fundamentally, I don't know if collapse, but definitely take attrition damage to the point where it can't function in the way that it's functioning? Meaning, how many of those people get up and leave when it becomes too much, when they get tired of living in bomb shelters and rat-infested sewers? How many leave? And does that, what does it do to this idea of Israel being a safe space, a place for Zionists where they can come and steal somebody else's home, where they can sit there and watch people get killed and starved? What does it mean for a state, for a colony, when that no longer becomes a safe place to be and there are bombs raiding constantly and you never know where they're going to hit and if you are going to be one of the people who get hit? It's one thing to drink your cappuccino as people go out and kill other people and you take their land. It's another thing when that cappuccino place get blown up or you're sitting there, there's an air raid and you're running with your cappuccino to get to a bomb shelter at the closest sewer. Those are different models. I'm saying in one model, they may just leave, which is the death of Israel. So let's go to, I want to drink some coffee. So let's go and see what has been taking place on the ground. Iran has been leveling up their strikes. In fact, these strikes have been taking place both. Israel has been doing punishing strikes against Iran, also hitting Tehran, hitting a prison, hitting, I believe it was Red Crescent, also hitting another facility, I forget the other facility, a jail. Iran has been punishing Israel, hitting facilities all across Israel, and including power centers, military bases, etc. Notice the difference in what they're targeting. This is, let's see, this is Ben Gurion Airport. Or what was parts of it. Wow. Just wow. Let's keep going. Here is, what is this? Institute for Biological Research. This is South Rishon, one of Israel's facilities. Yep. That place no longer exists. This video is the funniest thing in the world to me. This video is the funniest thing in the world to me. Look at this, look at this. An angry Zionist. He's like, oh, somebody put up a Palestinian flag. Those bastards. I'll go and teach them a thing or two.
למדינה שאינה קיימת, גועל נפש. חיים בינינו, לא יאומן. זה פשוט היה פאקינג מוקש או משהו. אני לא מאמינה.
Let's see that again, let's see that again. Let's see that again. Let's see it again. He didn't get up.
גועל נפש.
He didn't get up.
חיים בינינו, לא יאומן.
Yeah, man, there's consequences for being hateful and racist. There are consequences for that. Oh, there are consequences for that. And just so we're very clear, yes, I'm laughing, but they're still murdering people in mass. They're still murdering people. This kid who's on the cart, trigger warning, by the way, went to get food. And of course, they've been killing people who've been trying to get food. So, you know, my reason for laughter has to do with the righteous indignation. It's not just me being an asshole. Those food places have been kill sites. So you would get a large number of people, they would go try to get food because that's supposed to be places where they get food, and they would open up fire. I showed the video of them behind a machine gun just taking down people who were effectively trying to go get food and sustenance. I've shown videos of people falling, basically starving to death as they were trying to get and carry food. They're still doing it. Israel has killed like 100 people over the course of a day, and they've been doing this for days, after day, after day. It puts you in the mind of the Nazis, right? When it was very clear the Soviets were rummaging and coming to Berlin, it's like they were in downfall. And these ovens were still baking. They were still using metals, materials, steel, all of the stuff in order for the death camps. And it's like, you don't think you should be focusing on the war? No, murdering all of these Jews was more important, apparently. Same thing here. They were getting hit day after day after day with punishing strikes in Israel, in Tel Aviv, Haifa, etc. And they're still going with the death camps, still going with the massacres, still going with the bombings. They just haven't stopped. It's amazing. It shows the level of hatred that's coming out of the fascist colonist squatters. Here is another one. These are strikes that took place, I believe, yesterday. It's daylight outside, so I'm assuming yesterday. What the
או, איזה פחד.
מה, עינב?
השם ישמור, איזה פחד.
מה קרה?
נפל לידי כמעט על הראש.
That guy doesn't sound happy. That guy doesn't sound happy at all. He seems deeply bothered by it. He seems deeply bothered. Let's go for another one. This is another hit that took place. I'm not sure exactly where this one is. This may be in southern Israel somewhere. Big cloud of smoke. Something was destroyed. Let's go to another one. Now, this one is in Ashdod and Ashkelon. And I believe...
راحت الكهرباء. راحت الكهرباء فجروا. راحت الكهرباء. راحت الكهرباء فجروا. راحت الكهرباء.
Let's go to the next one. I want to see that one too. Yep. Yep. Now, this is, I believe, an impact into the power facility. And this is effectively took out power, energy, lights, 3,000, 4,000 people. Kofi, give me 1 second. Just give me 1 minute. All right, we take this one. And we take this one. Let's go to this one. This is what that looked like at a distance when the power facility went up in smoke. This is a Zionist explaining that 8,000 subscribers are without electricity in the last strike. Lord Bebo, God's work.
אנחנו נערכנו והתכוננו לאפשרות שתהיה פגיעה במתקני תשתית הקשורים לחשמל. נכון לעכשיו יש כ8,000 בתי אב מנותקים, ותוך פחות מ3 שעות נדאג להחזיר את החשמל לכולם. צוותי החירום כבר נמצאים בשטח.
It's like, we're prepared for this. 8,000 people to lose their power and electricity. Are you now? Are you now? Here is a hit on the military base in, I think it's called Nevdev. Man, this is some good coffee. This coffee is fantastic. Perfect. Perfect coffee. Perfect coffee. This is some good, good coffee. Here's another shot.
Wow.
I said, wow.
Wow.
He said, wow. Wow, indeed, sir. Wow, indeed.
Wow. Nefila. Wow.
Man, I'm running out of coffee.
Wow.
I'm running out of coffee. All right, let me go to my guests. I'm sitting here being a bit of an